Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we're studying Galatians chapter 6, so let's get started.
Okay, so after reading a book like Deuteronomy with 34 chapters over the course of like a month, reading a book like Galatians and finishing it in 6 days is feels like we didn't spend any time here. There are going to be some of us who walk into Sunday school this week and we're going to have one lesson in Galatians and we're going to go, man, I don't feel like there was any time in that. But what's true is that each of these chapters in Galatians, the chapters are relatively shorter than like what we read in Deuteronomy, but they are full of rich material. So here's what you got to remember. You got to remember that in the book of Galatians, Paul is dealing with a group of believers who came to Jesus by grace through faith, but somewhere along the way, people started slipping into their congregation. Now, these people, if you just kind of listen kind of between the lines a little bit, these people are probably coming out of Judaism. So they had gotten saved. Probably here, they are former Pharisees, and they're or at least followers of Pharisees, so very, very rooted into the law. And as they're coming into Galatia, they're teaching all of these, they're teaching what they know. So they go, yeah, Jesus is the Messiah, but here's the deal. Jesus saves you so that you can participate with us in these Jewish customs. So what they're doing is saying, it's great that you have Jesus, but you better follow the law too. Because salvation comes with like an Old and a New Testament hitched up together, law plus Jesus. And Paul wants them to know, it's Jesus plus nothing. And so he does not understand why they're drawn to traditions that did not save them. When he says this, he says, all these folks that are talking about the law to you, ask them if the law saved them, and they'll tell you that it didn't, and and that they still had to come to Jesus. And then say, ask them if they are able to keep it, because here's the deal: not a one of us could keep it. And he said then, if you can't keep it and it does not contribute to your salvation, then why are you linking the two? No. We come to Jesus and Jesus alone. We come to God through Jesus. Why? He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except through him. And so that's what's happening in the book of Galatians. Now, there's also in the backdrop of this, like the motives behind all of this. So these Jews, whoever they were, that are really causing trouble in Galatia, their big deal is they want the men to become Jewish. They want everybody to become Jewish, but the men would have to become Jewish, and they would have to go through the ritual of circumcision. Circumcision was the physical sign of Judaism in a man's life. And what they want is that people would join their Judaism. But Paul exposes their motives. So Paul was a Jew, or is a Jew, but he was a Pharisee. And now the same people he had served with now hate him because they believe that he's diminishing the law. He's not diminishing. He's just saying that the law was a teacher, but it was not the destination. So what they want to do is they are mistreating Paul, persecuting Paul, and so that they are not persecuted, they want these new believers to join with them. Hey, you go ahead and get circumcised. Join us. So that when they went back home and they talked to all their Jewish friends, they go, oh yeah, hey, don't worry about us. We're converting people to the true faith of Judaism. That's so they didn't have to go through persecution. Paul said, all they want to do is avoid hardship. He said, everything you see me suffering, they're trying to avoid. That's their motive. But Paul has a different motive, because look at the very beginning. He says, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual should restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. And then he says this, bear one another's burdens. Well, there's the different motive. So the Jews are saying, hey, get circumcised so it doesn't cause us any trouble. And Paul is saying, hey, no, you don't do anything for me. I want to bear your burdens. And he calls them brethren, which means family, which means a family can have conflict and still be family because they're struggling here. But he also wants them to know that nobody is immune from the temptation of sin. And he says that's why we're together. That's why we walk together. Because on days when you are weak, I'm gonna try to be strong. And days when I'm weak, I want you to be strong. This is the one another's of the Bible. You had a good takeaway from this. What was it?
Okay, my takeaway comes from the little part about, sowing and reaping. So if you don't know, sowing and reaping in real life, it's, like farming kind of, and it's like planting seeds and then getting like the crops out of those seeds that you planted. And this kind of thought thing, it can be applied throughout a ton of things in our life, and especially this, because so this section said that if you focus your time and your efforts on earthly things, and if you sow on earthly things, then you're going to reap and you're going to get earthly outcomes, I guess. And however, if you if you use seeds and you plant your life and you grow in your spiritual ways, then you're going to end up with a better relationship with God.
Well, and you're exactly right. What Paul is saying, he says, keep planting the spiritual, even if it looks like the harvest is never going to be there, because we're playing the long game in this. And when he's giving that analogy about farming, our mind goes back to chapter 5, where he talks about the fruit of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. So the fruit of the Spirit was love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. But back in chapter 5, the fruit of the flesh was he's got it here. He's got it: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contention, jealousy, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambition, deceit, heresy, evil, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries. And look, he could keep going. And what he's saying is, whatever you plant is what's going to grow. I read years ago that studies tell us it takes, in order for somebody to be an expert at something, it takes about 10,000 hours of practice before somebody becomes an expert at whatever. 10,000 hours before you become an expert, which is interesting, because what they're saying is, when you put in the time and you put in the effort and you put in the study and you put in the practice, that's what you develop. Well, that's not just in a skill or a hobby or a job. It's also in your spiritual life. Whatsoever a man sows, that will he also reap. Whatsoever a man plants, that's what's going to grow. So, I think the key there is say, hey, what are we planting? Here's another way to put it, and then we're going to close with this. So when I was your age, I was in youth group, and somebody, probably a youth minister, gave an analogy. I don't remember who said it, and it's out there. Hundreds of people have said it, right? But it stuck with me. He said, imagine you got two big dogs, and they're fighting, right? And you, as the owner, you decide you're going to feed one of them, but you're going to starve one of them. So they're big, massive, strong animals, but you feed this one and not this one. What's going to happen? This one gets stronger, this one gets weaker. Whatever you feed, that one is the one that's going to be the strongest. I think it's whatsoever man sows, that will he also reap. That's the book of Galatians. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you Monday when we start out the Gospel of Luke. All right, see you then. Bye.